Protests in Lebanon shift focus from the capital Beirut to the country's second city of Tripoli. Thousands commute nationwide to keep the anti-government movement alive. And one person is killed and dozens others wounded as clashes break out between Iraqi security forces and demonstrators. Deadly unrest that shows little signs of abating. And aid groups call it a huge natural catastrophe. Flooding in Central African Republic has left tens of thousands homeless, the country overwhelmed by the disaster. While protests in Beirut have lost some momentum since the government resigned, many commuted across Lebanon to keep the protests alive in the country's second city, Tripoli. There, more than half the population lives at or below the poverty line. Protests began more than 2 weeks ago against corruption, the political elite, and mismanagement of the economic crisis. Jean-Emile Jamin has more.
Al-Noor Square fervent with festive protest. Saturday saw hopeful Lebanese demonstrators continue dancing to the tune of regime change, with their demands for an end to widespread government corruption and economic mismanagement.
Of course we're sad. We are angry because of everything that has happened. But when we protest in this way with music, it's good for morale. We do not stay sad all the time.
During the day, buses loaded with protesters departed from Beirut, as well as east and south Lebanon, to join thousands of demonstrators in Tripoli. Here they have taken on a uniquely Lebanese style, using creative methods to unite under one banner and get the message through to government. Protests erupted across Lebanon last month, ultimately resulting in the resignation of Prime Minister Saad Hariri. However, for many, the changes have fallen short.
We will stay in the street and continue demonstrating because our demands still haven't been met. Maybe we won't get them. The official speeches are vague, and the people have lost confidence in them.
Calls continue for the installation of technocrats and experts into prominent ministerial positions. In the face of unwavering and persistent defiance, it will now be up to government to regain the trust of the Lebanese public, a trust which may have eroded beyond repair.
Well, protests once again turned deadly in Iraq. Security forces killed one person and wounded 91 others in the capital. For weeks, demonstrators have been congregating in Baghdad's central Tahrir Square, angry over corruption and high unemployment. It is the biggest wave of rallies the country has seen since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Monty Francis has more.
A growing unrest on display as tens of thousands of protesters gathered in Baghdad's Tahrir Square Saturday in what appeared to be the largest demonstration since anti-government protests began 1 month ago. In Basra, thousands of protesters blocked roads leading to Iraq's main Gulf port, unmoved by the promised resignation of Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi and vows from President Barham Saleh to reform the country's electoral system.
The people want the fall of the government, for the government to resign. They are asking for change. We want a new government to give us our rights and be fair with us. We don't trust them now because there are no reforms for the Iraqi society.
Since the protests began on October 1st, 250 protesters have died in the violence across the country, and thousands more have been injured. There are fears the death toll could rise further if Iraqi police use force against protesters currently occupying 2 bridges that span the Tigris River in Baghdad. The bridges lead to the Green Zone, where the government's buildings are located, and so far, security forces are holding back. On Saturday, a top religious leader for Iraqi Catholics visited the demonstrators to express his support.
Our visit is an expression of solidarity and of our support to our country, which is at a dangerous crossroads. We call upon politicians to find solutions that assures everyone's safety and stability.
Security forces have denied using live ammunition against protesters, but many victims have been killed by hurling military-grade tear gas canisters, which human rights groups argue amounts to lethal force.
A car bomb killed at least 13 people in a Turkish-held border town in northeast Syria. No group has claimed responsibility, but Turkey's government pointed the finger at the Kurdish YPG militia. Tel Abyad is one of several towns that had been held by Syrian Kurds until Turkey launched its cross-border offensive last month. Julie Kim has details.
Shock and confusion on the streets of Tel Abyad after a car bomb exploded in the town centre. The deadly attack targeted a marketplace, destroying shop fronts and nearby vehicles. While the injured were hurried away, residents used soft drinks to put out the flames. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the victims were civilians and pro-Turkish fighters. Turkey last month seized the Kurdish-controlled town in a deadly cross-border offensive. For the country's foreign minister, there's no doubt who's to blame.
The attack targeting innocent civilians in Tel Abyad should serve as a lesson to those who provide shelter to the YPG terrorist organization and justify its actions. This heinous attack proves once again how right and timely Operation Peace Spring was.
Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the main Kurdish-led force in Syria blamed Turkey for the blast, saying it had created chaos in the region. Saturday's blast came despite a Russian-brokered truce almost 2 weeks ago to stop Turkey's military operation. The deal demands that Kurdish fighters withdraw from a band of territory along Syria's border with Turkey. It also allows for Turkish troops to occupy some of that area and perform patrols to make sure the Kurds leave. On Friday, Moscow and Ankara launched the first of its joint patrols there.
Well, it was another turbulent Saturday in Hong Kong amid 5 months of protests against China's perceived influence on the semi-autonomous city. In one of the most direct challenges to Beijing yet, China's official news agency, Xinhua, was one of several buildings that were vandalized. Activists also hurled petrol bombs and set fire to metro stations. More than 200 people were arrested. Saturday was the worst violence the city has seen in weeks, and the protests show no signs of abating. 8 months after Algeria's longtime leader Abdelaziz Bouteflika was forced to resign following months of mass protests, the country appears to be one step closer to finding his replacement. A total of 23 candidates had submitted their papers to run in next month's election, but only 5 were approved, including 2 former prime ministers. That's, however, unlikely to appease pro-democracy activists. They've demanded sweeping reforms before any vote takes place, fearful that remnants of the old guard will try to cling to power. Still, electoral authorities defended the process.
The result today squashes all those who doubted the capacities of the authority to organize an election, and all those of you who doubted the possibility of going toward a free and impartial election.
The so-called Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for 2 attacks in Mali. One, a raid on an outpost near the border with Niger that left 49 Malian troops dead, and another in which a French soldier was killed when his vehicle was hit by an improvised explosive device. There's been a resurgence of jihadist attacks in the wider region, despite the presence of some 5,000 troops from West African countries. Well, the Central African Republic has seen its worst flooding in 2 decades. Nearly 30,000 people have been left homeless. In the capital, Bangui, with a population of about 1 million, mud homes literally dissolved in the floods. Our team on the ground reports.
Following 15 days of intense rain, a calm falls on the Ubangi River, whose banks have left many neighborhoods in Bangui underwater, displacing 30,000 residents. Victims such as this 48-year-old father of 7 children. His home was carried away by the rising water.
The rains totally destroyed the homes in this neighborhood, including mine. For 2 weeks, the water kept rising. Now we have nothing, not even a mat to sleep on.
Flood victims are now mostly on their own, hoping for international assistance to arrive after a call for help from the Central African Republic. In the meantime, people are in survival mode. Among the 1,500 flood victims in this district is this woman, who's been sleeping in a tent with 20 people.
We've been abandoned. Not even an official or the mayor came to see us. See how we suffer. Why do we care about others and not about ourselves? We're also Central Africans, aren't we?
Far from receding, the water levels continue to rise. For the victims, each time they're displaced, it's a new puzzle. They have to pay the equivalent of 38 cents to cross the river by canoe. There are also concerns about the floodwater being contaminated by waste, posing a danger, especially to children already dealing with health problems.
My daughter is suffering from malaria, and I do not have enough resources to care for her. Even to eat, it is very difficult. We don't have anything.
As the rainy season continues, life has stopped for people on the banks of the Ubangi River. Now the capital of the Central African Republic, still recovering from 6 years of war, is preparing to face another humanitarian crisis.
Airbnb's clamping down on unauthorized parties. The move comes in the wake of a shooting at an Airbnb rental home in California. 5 people were killed. The 4-bedroom home had been rented on Airbnb by a woman who had told the owner her dozen family members had asthma and needed to escape smoke from a nearby wildfire. In a series of tweets, though, the CEO, Brian Chesky, said the San Francisco-based company will be expanding its screening of high-risk reservations. Donald Trump's latest effort to limit immigration into the United States has been thwarted by a federal judge. The U.S. president had proposed that immigrants should be required to prove they will have health insurance within 30 days of arrival in the country, or could pay for medical care, a move that would potentially block hundreds of thousands of legal migrants. But Judge Michael Simon granted preliminary injunctions saying that the potential damage to families justified a nationwide ban. Just weeks after 39 migrants were found dead in a truck in Britain, a worrying development on the French-Italian border. Agents found 30 people hiding in a truck at a highway checkpoint. The migrants were handed over to Italian authorities. Monty Francis has the details.
It was here at the French-Italian border that their journey ended. At this checkpoint, 30 Pakistani migrants discovered hiding inside a commercial vehicle.
There were 2 minors, 14 and 15 years old, who were found in the front of the truck. The rest were crowded inside, and I think they would have had an accident if they had continued on the highway.
A shocking story that's becoming more common. 6 days ago in the northern French port city of Calais, 8 people were found in the back of a refrigerated truck. Near London last month, 39 migrants were found dead, also inside a refrigerated truck. Hoping for a new life, they had just a matter of hours to survive the conditions inside, to cross the border and get past border police. There's an increased vigilance at the French border, as was evident in Calais over the last few days. This time, 4 people found hiding behind these beer kegs. Today, there are 3 main points of access to France that have been identified: Italy, Spain, and Belgium. The migrants, most of whom want passage to the United Kingdom, are now coming in greater numbers in anticipation of Brexit.
Their borders are more and more closed, and that's making the human traffickers believe there won't be many advantages after Brexit. We have migrants who are willing to take bigger and bigger risks and to pay the traffickers more and more money.
According to French customs, 19,000 migrants have been arrested in Calais since the beginning of the year.
Celebrations for Mexico's annual Day of the Dead have wrapped up the holiday, a celebration of those who have passed away. A time for families to reflect that death is a natural part of life and the loved ones are never truly gone. Roots of these ideas date back to the pre-Hispanic era, though this parade is much more recent, inspired by a scene from the 2015 James Bond movie Spectre. But since then, the parade has become a hit both for Mexicans and tourists from around the world.
I think it's way more somber, and it's much more about the sadness rather than celebrating the person that they were, if that makes sense. And I feel like this seems like a healthier attitude, you know, celebrating and appreciating the person as opposed to just being very sad all the time.
That's it from the newsroom. Please stay tuned to France 24.